So this is the lesson for 7-3, day 2. All right, we're still dealing with excuse me, we're still dealing with parallel lines cut by a transversal. So you have to remember these angles from yesterday. Remember that supplementary angles are right next to each other. Now they could be along the top. Remember that they could be along the side because this could be a 50 here. So you could have like the 130 and 50. They could be across the bottom or on the other side. Supplementary angles, this is very, very important for today. Supplementary angles add up to 180 degrees. You have one acute angle and one obtuse angle. Vertical angles are equal to each other. Remember, vertical angles form an X like this. And the top and bottom of the X are the same. The left and the right of the X are the same. With vertical angles, either both of the angles are going to be acute or both of the angles are going to be obtuse. For corresponding angles, remember that the S and P in corresponding stands for the same place. So for example, this 50 and this 50, they are in the top left and the top left. Remember what you want to do is separate it into the top half set of angles and the bottom half set of angles. So corresponding means that they're in the same place, like this one is in the top left and the top left. Corresponding angles are always equal to each other. They're either both acute angles or both obtuse angles. Alternate interior angles are also equal to each other. They are inside the parallel lines in opposite corners. They are either both acute or both obtuse. And again, they are equal. Today, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be setting up an equation and solving for X, and then subbing it back in to find the missing angles. When you go to set up your equations, you have to make a decision. You have to decide whether they are equal to each other or whether they add up to 180. The only kind that will add up to 180 is when they are supplementary angles. Otherwise, if you have vertical angles, they're always equal to each other. Corresponding angles, they're always equal to each other. Alternate interior angles, they're always equal to each other. Also, you can tell by looking at the size of the angle. If they are the same angle, either both acute or both obtuse, you know that they're going to be equal to each other. But anytime that you have one acute and one obtuse, they are going to be equal to 180. So we have to add together our X's and our X's, our plane numbers and our plane numbers, and set it equal to 180. So again, the steps that you're going to follow today, the first thing that you're going to have to do is identify what type of angles are given. So by that, I mean, are they supplementary, vertical, corresponding, or alternate interior? Then you're going to set up an equation. Again, you have to decide, do they add up to 180 or are they equal to each other? You're going to solve that equation for X, and then you're going to sub it back in to find the missing angles. So there are 5 different types of questions. So let's take a look at this one first. In this one, the first thing that you have to decide is what type of angles do we have here? Well, I can see that they are inside the parallel lines in opposite corners. So that means these are alternate interior. Now, when you have alternate interior angles are equal to each other. We can also tell that they are equal to each other because if you look at the size of the angle, they are both acute angles. Anytime that you have the same size, they're going to be equal to each other. So when we go to set up our equation, all that you're going to do is set one angle equal to the other angle. So 3x plus 20 equals 5x. If you wanted to write it the opposite way and put 5x equals 3x plus 20, that's the same exact thing. So now we want to solve this equation. I like working with the smaller of the 2 letters first when you have letters on both sides of the equal sign. So I'm doing minus 3x to both sides. Divide by 2, and we get 10 equals x. Now, 10 is not the size of the angle. We now need to take that 10 and sub it back in and sub it back in, just like we did earlier on in the chapter to find the angles. So instead of 5 times x, we have 5 times 10, which is 50 for this angle. Instead of 3 times x, we have 3 times 10, which is 30, plus 20 is 50. Always make sure that your answer makes sense. We said that these angles for alternate interior are equal to each other, and we got 50 and 50. So our answer does make sense. Let's take a look at the next one. So again, the first thing that you want to do is decide, are they alternate interior, corresponding, vertical, or supplementary? These angles are in the same place. Remember that you have an upper half set of angles and a bottom half set of angles. These angles are in the upper right and upper right. Therefore, they are corresponding angles. So when we go to set up our equation, again, your only choices are they equal to each other or do they add up to 180? Supplementary is the only one that adds up to 180. So these are equal to each other. So we're going to set them equal to each other. The one angle equals the other angle. Also, you know that they're equal to each other because if you look at the size of the angle, they are both acute angles. If they're both the same size angle, they are equal to each other. We're going to do minus 2x and minus 2x to get all of our x's on one side of the equal sign. Now we just have a one-step equation, minus 20 minus 20. So 20 equals x. We now need to solve for the angle, so we need to sub it in for x and sub it in for x. Instead of 2 times x, we have 2 times 20, which is 40, plus 40 is 80 for this angle. 3 times x, instead of 3 times x, we have 3 times 20, which is 60, plus 20 is 80. So we got 80 and 80. They are equal to each other. Take a look at this next one. So again, we have to decide what kind of angles we have first. Well, when you look at this one, we have an X right here. This is like, if you turn your head to the side a little bit, that's like the top and bottom of the X. So these are vertical angles. Vertical angles are equal to each other. We can also tell that they're equal to each other because they are the same size angle. Remember, we could always put that equal sign right in the middle of vertical angles. So we have the equation 2x plus 10 equals 4x plus 2. Again, you have letters on both sides of the equal sign. I like working with the smaller of the two letters first. So minus 2x and minus 2x. Now it's just a two-step equation, minus 2 minus 2. Divide by 2, divide by 2. And you get x equals 4. 4 is not the size of our angle. We now have to take that 4 and sub it in for x and sub it in for x. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 10 is 18. 4 times 4 is 16, plus 2 is 18. So we got 18 and 18. Our answer makes sense because they are equal to each other. Take a look at the next one. So in this next one, you need to be very, very careful, all right? This time, they are not equal to each other. Notice that we have one obtuse angle and we have one acute angle. They are different sized angles. Anytime that they are different sized angles, you know that they have to be supplementary. We also know that they are supplementary because they are right next to each other. They're taking that straight angle and dividing it into two pieces. So we know that they are supplementary angles. Now, supplementary angles add up to 180. So we can put an equals 180 right at the end. Add together our x's and our x's. So 3x plus 2x is 5x. Add together our -5 and our -10. Make sure that you pay attention to the sign that's in front of the number. So yes, this was -5 and -10, but when we add them together, it's -5 plus -10, which is -15. So there's our equation. Solve for x, so plus 15 plus 15. So 5x equals 195. Divide by 5, divide by 5. 195 divided by 5 gives you 39. 39 is not the size of the angle. 39 is just what x is. So we need to take that 39, sub it back in, and sub it back in. 3 times 39 minus 5 is 112. 2 times 39 minus 10 is 68. Always make sure that your answer makes sense. 112 plus 68 does give you 180, which is what we wanted to get in the end. So again, you had one obtuse and one acute. That is your sign that it is supplementary. Now, this is a trick question. On the New York State test, they love this question, all right, because it is a trick question. Pay very close attention to this. You do have ones like this on your homework. So when you go to look at what type of angles they are, we have alternate interior. Are they inside the parallel lines and opposite corners? No, they're not. Are they corresponding? Are they in the same place? This is in the upper right. This is in the bottom right. So no, they're not in the same place. Are they vertical angles? Do they form an X? No, they don't. Are they supplementary angles? Are they right next to each other, with one being acute and one being obtuse? Well, almost. All right, one is acute and one is obtuse. This angle is acute. This angle is obtuse. So they are different sized angles. Anytime that they are different sized angles, they have to be supplementary. Now, what you actually have to do here to sort of make them into supplementary angles is move one of the angles. Remember that we said that you have a top half set of angles and you have a bottom half set of angles. Well, what you can actually do is you can move angles around so that they are one of those, all right? They're not always going to be supplementary when you move them, all right? But in this case, it's going to be supplementary. I can take this angle right here, 7x plus 10, and I can move it to be right here because this angle is in the bottom right and bottom right. So I can take and I can move this angle up to here. So now I have 7x plus 10 right there because of corresponding angles. Corresponding angles said that these two yellow angles are exactly the same because they're in the same spot. So I can move this angle up to be here, and now these two angles are right next to each other. Now they're supplementary. Now you could have done this a different way also. I know that this angle is in the upper right. I could have moved that angle down to be in the upper right. So I can also move this angle down to here and have 3x minus 20 down here. And now these two in the bottom half are supplementary as well. So sometimes you're going to have to move one of the angles based on corresponding, if they aren't already clear which kind of angle they are. Anyway, we have one acute and one obtuse. So we know that we have supplementary angles. Supplementary angles add up to 180. So 3x plus 7x is 10x. Negative 20 plus 10 is negative 10. So solving this two-step equation, plus 10 plus 10. So I have 10x equals 190. Divide by 10, divide by 10. And you get x equals 19. 19 is not your angle measurement. 19 we need to take and sub it in for x and sub it in for x. It doesn't matter which one you sub it into as long as it's one of each of the angles. So 3 times 19 minus 20 is 37 for this upper angle. Subbing it into the 7x plus 10, 7 times 39, or sorry, 7 times 19 plus 10 is 143. So our two angles are 37 and 143. Always make sure that your answer makes sense. 37 plus 143 does give you 180. So again, be very, very careful on this one. These ended up being supplementary angles once we moved the angle. All right, if you could try this one on your own, please. All right, say what kind of angle it is, set up an equation, solve for x, and sub it back in. Go ahead and try this one, please. Give me about 30 seconds longer. So these two angles are inside the parallel lines in opposite corners. Therefore, they are alternate interior angles. Alternate interior angles are equal to each other. We also know that they're equal to each other because they're both acute angles. So 3x plus 30 equals 7x plus 10. We have letters on both sides, so minus 3x minus 3x. So 30 equals 4x plus 10. Minus 10 minus 10 is just a two-step equation now. So 20 equals 4x. Divide by 4, divide by 4, x equals 5. Take that 5 and sub it back in. And sub it back in. 3 times 5 is 15, plus 30 is 45. 7 times 5 is 35, plus 10 is 45. So we have 45 and 45. Go ahead and try this next one, please. Say what type of angles they are, set up your equation, solve for x, sub it back in to find the missing angles. Remember, if you're struggling to see what kind of angles they are, take a look at the size of the angles. So this is actually one of those trick questions. Notice that you have one acute angle and one obtuse angle. Anytime that you have one of each, it has to be supplementary angles. Now, what could we do? How could we figure that out? Well, we can move this angle up because this is in the top left. This is also in the top left, so we could move it up because of corresponding angles, or we could move this angle down, top right and top right. Now, whichever way that you did it, those two angles are next to each other. So now they are supplementary for sure. They add up to 180. So 20x plus 5x is 25x. Negative 10 and negative 10 is negative 20. So plus 20 plus 20. So I have 25x equals 200. Divide by 25, divide by 25. So you get x equals 8. Take that 8 and sub it back in for x. Sub it back in for x. 20 times 8 minus 10 is 150. 5 times 8 is 40 minus 10 is 30. So you get 150 and 30. Our answer makes sense. 150 plus 30 does give us 180. Go ahead and try this last one, please. Say what type of angles they are. Set up an equation. Solve for x. Sub it back in. These are vertical angles. Vertical angles form an X. The top and bottom of the X are the same. The left and the right of the X are the same. These two angles are equal to each other. They're also both acute angles. That's how you can tell that they are also equal to each other. So we need to set one angle equals the other angle. Minus 5x minus 5x. So 5x equals 5. Divide by 5, divide by 5. You get x equals 1. Take that 1 and sub it back in, sub it back in. 10 times 1 is 10. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 5 is 10. So you get 10 and 10. On your homework today, again, very, very important that you know what the pictures look like. All right, supplementary angles are the only ones that add up to 180. They're right next to each other, one acute and one obtuse. Vertical angles form that X. They're equal to each other. Corresponding are in the same place. They are equal to each other. Alternate interior are inside the parallel lines and opposite corners. They are equal to each other.